Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Addicts Season 2, and we are on episode 29. My guest this week is Father Bob. We'll start out like we always do, Father Bob, and just introduce yourself to everybody, and then we will dig into the program.
Sure. My name is Father Bob Bailey. I'm a retired Roman Catholic priest. I'm living in Providence, Rhode Island. And amongst other things that I do, in my retirement now, I more try to teach and respond to spiritual warfare issues in the paranormal.
So, I guess most of my viewers know this by now, and I actually am trained in demonology. I trained under Bishop James Long.
Mm-hmm.
So I take my education very seriously. Matter of fact, I had Rain Kirby on the show last season, and he made a statement that I think is very important, and that was that in the paranormal field, it's important. The most important thing is to always continue being educated and continue learning. And
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I did. I actually have a college degree in parapsychology from West Georgia University. I got 2 degrees in theology from Louisville Bible College, and then I'm trained in demonology under the Old Catholic Church in Bishop Long. So besides my 35 years in the field, so and then of course I God gifted me with the abilities to be able to see and speak to the spirits. So, and as a kid, I didn't necessarily look at those as gifts, but as I've learned to use them and
control them.
And control them, I definitely look at them as gifts. I explain it to people all the time. To me, my abilities, my gifts, they're given to me from God to be used to help people in the paranormal field. And I like the fact. I'm happy to have you in the show. I've been trying to get somebody, Bishop Long can never. We can never get him on the show because Fridays are a bad day for him because he does his own. And then I had Bishop Godin was going to come on here, but that was right when his mother was having all of her health issues. So that never happened. So because I've always wanted to discuss the the religious aspect of the paranormal investigating, on the show, because I'm from Western Kentucky. That's where I was born, raised, and that's where I live now. I didn't always live here. I moved around a lot, but I always came back home. So growing up, not only was I in the Bible Belt, but I was in the heart of the Bible Belt. We have a church on every corner. So I was told many times growing up, I was told that my gifts made me a tool of the devil, and I was going to hell, a lot. And when I was 12 when I first when I made the conscious decision to learn to use my abilities and to become an investigator. I was 12 years old. So this was 1986, to age myself a little bit. So in 1986 in Paducah, Kentucky, I had nobody to mentor me, nobody to mentor me, nobody to none of that stuff. So when I decided to go into this, deep, my guides in the field was I decided to check out every library book I could get my hands on, whether it was at the public library or whether it was at the school library. I don't like using the term my Bible because actually, obviously, the Bible is my Bible. So, but my guide in the spiritual field was actually all of the Warren's books. I checked out every book they had. That was all I had. So what I tell people, and it's kind of funny now. It wasn't funny in 1986 at 12 years old, but it's funny looking back. At 12 years old, my mentors was the Warrens through the books, and then I had Robert Stack on Unsolved Mysteries. That was it. That's all I had. It's not like nowadays where you have, for better or worse, you have all these TV shows. I didn't have any of that, and so we had my best friend who's no longer with us, Tracy. He actually got into the paranormal with me. We did it together, and so at 12, we were both pretty popular kids at the time. I was an athlete, I was a football player and all that stuff, basketball. So while all of our friends were going to like the local haunted attractions, me and Tracy was actually spending the night in actual supposed haunted houses. And so that was interesting. Me and Tracy actually got called down to the principal's office because of checking out all these books. The principal actually looked at us and he's like, "Should I be worried about you?" I'm like, so it was an interesting time. So I like that. I like the religious aspect from it. One thing I've learned, through my education, especially my education in theology. So the Bible verse that your Christians like to use against paranormal investigating, ghost hunting, whatever you want to call it, they like to use Ezekiel. And the verse that they like to use in the King James Version, in the old King Jimmy, as I like to call it, the old King James Version, it says, "Do not speak to the living dead because you don't know if they're good or evil." That's what it says. So, which is interesting. So, studying theology like I did, I also studied translations of the Bible. So, what people have to understand is the King James Version of the Bible, the old King Jimmy Version, is a paraphrased translation. It's paraphrased, and it's written. They wrote it to supposedly sound good. They wanted it to sound like a Shakespeare play, and it was written. It was a paraphrase. So for the people out there that don't understand what a paraphrased translation is, it basically means a group of guys, and at this time it was all guys. A group of guys sat around the table and read the Hebrew and Latin version, and they're like, "Oh, this is what it means to me." That's what paraphrase means. So the actual Latin translation says it a little bit different. The King James Version leaves out a few words out of the Latin, and they're important words. So the actual Latin version says, the actual Latin translation says, "Brothers, do not speak to the living dead unless you're trained or educated, because you will not know whether they are good or evil." So that's an important difference. So but I've learned a lot of times, especially down here in Western Kentucky, trying to argue with these people, it defeats my purpose because it just gets me mad, and they're not going to listen to me anyway. But I think it's important. I actually, I got my born again tattoo. I consider myself a Christian. And like I said, to me, my gifts are from God, and God don't make mistakes. So if He gave them to me, there's a reason. So I think I talked for like 10 minutes there. But do you agree with my opinion, or what's your opinion on?
Yeah, especially with the scripture. The one I like to use that gets a lot of mileage in the Old Testament is when the Witch of Endor, and when they Saul asked to conjure up Solomon,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's where he went wrong, and that's what's condemned by God. And there's a big difference between conjuring up and what we do when we go into a place to investigate. We are
Right.
not conjuring up, or we shouldn't be conjuring up, but rather trying to find out, is there something there? If it is it human or inhuman? And why is it there? So it's not against our faith, I believe, in my opinion, to go in and to try and find out what's there, so long as we don't, start going with conjuring devices, and that's
Right. Right.
like Ouija boards and seances and stuff like that. That even the best people who say they know how to do it, they still don't. They don't have control over what comes through.
Right. No,
You
I
know.
mean, if it's an inhuman spirit, we have no control over it.
No.
Yeah. So I completely agree with that. My team, Canton Paranormal, we're a large team. We have 18 members, and so when you join my team, you don't get to just jump in and do investigation with us. There's a process. You go through orientation, you go through training, because
Hmm.
I have to make sure you're doing it the right way. And that's one of the things. No conjuring, no provoking. We treat everybody with respect. The location, the people, the spirits, the land, everything is about being respectful. And that's really like when you get to provoking and all that stuff. That's all about the intent. So I wouldn't go to somebody's house. Say I wouldn't go to your house and start yelling at you and expect a positive response. So why would I do that to a spirit?
Hmm. And
Especially
I would say, and if you find you're encountering inhuman evil, then you need to stop and regroup, evaluate, discern whether you can handle it or whether you need to call others in who have had seasoned. That's the thing that that again, you can't take the demonic. Some people, and I even see it in these so-called exorcism groups, and it's like, I've done 30 exorcism a month. What? What? Okay, you need to stop for a minute and evaluate, what's really
right,
going on there, and not just jump to that conclusion. But even so, if you do think it is, you need to stop and
right,
to discern whether you have the faith to be able to come against that.
right, because if you don't have the faith and you don't have the training and all that, you're actually going to make the situation worse. And
Exactly.
I have a person as a team that I know, and I don't mention their names anymore because when they first got in the field, I was trying to help them because that's what I do. I'm all about the para unity, if you want to use that term. I'm all about the community. I'm all about teaching. Helping. Well, so when they first got in there, I tried to help them. But the thing that was obvious from the beginning is they got into the paranormal because they saw it as a way to make money. They want
Mm,
they want the TV show is what they want. So when they first got into it, they just started buying like the expensive stuff. They bought old amulets and put the logo on it and all that stuff. Well, I was still trying to help them, at least try to help make sure they did things the proper way. Well,
mhm,
so skip forward about 6 months, and they decided to supposedly go help this 85-year-old lady in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, they ended up telling this 85-year-old lady in Memphis, Tennessee, that she had 2 portals that they couldn't close and 5 demons that she was just stuck with. Only reason I found out about this case is because she is one of my regular viewers on my podcast, and so on the podcast after this team had came together, she started making comments on my thing. And I was like, "What?" I was like, "This is my number. Call me after the podcast." So I'm probably 3 hours from Memphis, but I have friends in Memphis that I trust, so I had them go down there and help them. Well, the next thing they do is the guy decides after a year of paranormal investigating, he decided on his own that he was a demonologist.
Oh God, I know.
No training, nothing. He just decided. So
Reading a couple of books.
yeah, and then after that, I completely just forgot about him. I was like, whatever. Well, then I went and investigated a couple months ago. I've actually investigated it twice this year. I went and investigated this place in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. I mean, ghost hunters have been there. Outlaw Paranormal's been there, so it's a relatively known place. Well, I get there and I call or make the appointment to investigate, and they're like, well, we no longer allow teams to just come. One of the staff members have to be with you. So we get there, and as soon as we get there, I'm down talking to everybody. So the curator is yelling for me, and I get up there, and she's like, you're Kent. I was like, yeah. She's like, well, I'm just giving you the tour, and then I'm leaving you because we've had 6 people call and say how good you are. So we're not staying with you. And as we're going on the tour, she tells me that the team, because they're from the same town as the Glen House, she's like, they're the reason why we don't allow people to investigate on their own anymore, because they started yelling at all the spirits while they were filming. And she's like, we hate that. She's like, the thing that we hate the most about it is they have all the cool equipment, so the young kids think they're cool, so they go to them. And she's like, and they need to be going to like you or like Outlaw, like the real teams, but they're attracted by, whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of that. I like to call it, my word for that is para pop culture. That's my word. I think it's a good word. So let's just go ahead and address that, because that's one of the questions I usually ask later on. So how do you think the para-pop culture has affected the paranormal field, both positively and negatively?
Well, I think negatively, I think a lot of the things that are on television, now I have been on television, but a lot of the shows that are on are teaching people to do things that they shouldn't be doing, that are going to get them into more trouble, daring, and it's like, this isn't reality. You're not helping anyone. And then you're going just into haunted places for, excuse me, shits and giggles, and, are you client based? How many people are you helping? So I see that in some groups. There are some very good groups out there, with integrity too. But there's also that pop culture that just wants to go from one haunted place to another. Hey, I like going to a haunted place, a reputed haunted place, just like anybody else. But that's not a steady for me. The steady is helping people, educating people, even doing workshops if I can, and you know, yeah, and that, like I said, that's the danger in the pop culture kind of thing, and they give it unfortunately with television, it gives a false kind of a false narrative that everything can be wrapped up in an hour.
Right.
And really, like on Paranormal State, I mean, granted, you're only there for so long, but a lot of times the PRS has been there for 4 or 5 days, but
Right.
they have to encapsulate everything into an hour show.
Right.
And so that gives people the false thing, like, well, can't you just do it once and that's it? Just come once.
Right. Yeah. And that's like, that's like, I guess, the godfathers of the para-pop culture for our generation, not for my generation, but for the today's generation, is probably ghost hunters. Grant and Steve and all of them. So, and especially the early seasons of ghost hunters, I have no problem with. But like you just said, what people have to realize is and Jason talks about this all the time. They're on location for like 3 or 4 days, but you only see an hour, actually probably 50 minutes with commercials. You only see the 50 minutes that the producers want you to see. So, and then I also think another problem with the TV, especially the YouTube generation, is for some reason people think if you have a YouTube channel, and I have a YouTube channel, so I'm not bashing it, but everybody automatically thinks if you have a YouTube channel, that gives you credibility. And some of the teams, I'll even say the majority of the teams on YouTube are not replicable teams. But like you said, they're all good teams out there. So I'm not bashing all teams like Paranormal Journey. I love Paranormal Journey. Outlaw Paranormal, I like them. But for every Outlaw Paranormal, every Paranormal Journey you have your Sam and Kobe's, and you have you have those. So not everything is a demon. So that's a problem. So yeah, so I agree with that. To me, the only positive really is now when I go to Walmart or the mall or whatever, I still get some people tell me I'm a tool of the devil, but I also get people that's like, oh, you mean like ghost hunters. So that's a positive because I can talk about it more. Like I actually do a Paracon or whatever you want to call it. We don't call it a Paracon. We call it a Paranormal Expo. We actually do one down here in Mayfield every year. This is my 4th year doing it. We're already planning next year. Joe Frankie's actually coming down for it next year. So yeah, and I do that not to make money. I do it to educate the public and open that conversation. And so yeah, and I do the workshops and stuff just like you said. And we share an agent. Asia is my agent too. So so I guess. As reluctantly as I like to put myself in that category, I guess I'm part of that para-pop culture too. I'm not a celebrity. I don't want to be a celebrity. So yeah. So para-pop culture, like everything, is a two-edged sword.
Yes.
I had Rob and Sarah on here last year, from Get Haunted, and we were talking about like egos and stuff, and Sarah made a point that I agree with to a certain point, and she said that everybody, even the ones that fake the stuff, like they have a place in the field because the people that tune in to see, like Sam and Kobe, they're just looking for entertainment. They're not going to be the same one. They're not going to be the same people that tune in to me or you. They don't care what it's really like. They're just looking to be entertained. So
and there's a market for that. Like myself, like I don't watch many real paranormal shows that go into because I do the work. So, but I do like to be entertained. And again, one of my favorite, the only one I really watch is Project Fear. And they go into reputable haunted places. It's not, but that's the scope of what they do, and I enjoy it. Not that the thought of ghosts and demons don't scare me, but when they have to sleep alone, sometimes I feel that adrenaline of when they're alone and what they could be encountering, human or non-human. So I find that entertaining, and I really love those. I would love to meet them sometime.
So I actually did meet them. I actually got to meet them at Smoky Mountain Terror. I was actually one of the. So they were actually right beside me. It was so Smoky Mountain Terror is mostly horror, but they throw bones to the paranormal field. So you had Outlaw Paranormal, you had Fair Network, then you had me, then you had SOS, then you had Project Fair. So so they're really nice kids. They're kids.
Very much.
But they're very nice. I actually called them, and they probably thought I was probably like, excuse my language, but they probably thought I was like an asshole when they first met me. Because I actually called them out on 2 things. Because that's me. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm about the integrity of the field. So I called them out on the fact that they were charging $60 for a picture, not even an autograph picture, just a picture. They were charging $60 for it. So
Really?
yeah.
Well, I'm going to
So
have to sell my picture.
So I called them out on that, and then I called them out because I had just collaborated with Sam and Kobe. So what was cool is they looked at me. I mean, we were having a conversation, and they looked at me, and their exact response was, "I get that." That was the response. But they were really cool with me. They were really good. I had we ate dinner together on Saturday.
Yeah, I've met them. I was actually their spiritual bodyguard at the Warrens Museum.
Yeah, and they and like like I said, to me they were overcharging other people, but like anything I wanted, they gave to me for free. So there was like I get professional courtesy, I guess, if you want to use that term. So yeah, so yeah, they were really cool. And what was really cool is my team lead, like I said, I have 18 people on my team, so I have to have 2 team leads to help me, because it's like herding cats sometimes. And so it was the only members of my team that went down there was me, and my team lead Jill, and my wife. And my wife don't even investigate with her; she just went. It was like a vacation for her. I teased her that she went to meet the Tri-Light people. I don't really know why she went, but that's what I told her. I was like, vampires ain't supposed to sparkle. But so anyway, so we went down there, and Jill's son is on our team too, and he's a huge Project Fair fan. Like that's his, he like fanboys over them. He's into anime and them. So like. While I was talking to him, I was doing live videos and sending to him and stuff. But they actually autographed one of their pictures and one of their bracelets and sent it to them. So they're good guys. I mean, I guess if you get $60 for a picture, get $60 for a picture. It's not my,
Hey, but, people are willing to pay.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't either.
I would love to be with them and meet them. I wouldn't pay anybody $60 for a picture.
No. I mean, a lot of the celebrities like Jason Holder and all them, Kane Holder and all them, they were charging like that much, but that was an autograph and a picture, and I didn't even pay that. I definitely wasn't going to pay it for an autograph picture. But here was the most interesting thing that happened to me at Smoky Mountain Terror. First thing, I was kind of humbled because I consider myself a nobody. I mean, I realize my podcast is pretty big, and I realize I got 2,000 followers. I realize that I'm not an idiot. I see the numbers. But to me, I'm still a nobody. I'm just an investigator. That's all I am. Well, I was overwhelmed and humbled by how many people there, including the celebrities and the fans, knew who I was. It was like a humbling experience. And then Sunday, which was the last day of the event, I decided to, kind of be a fanboy myself. So I went around and got autographs and stuff. And I had my picture taken, and I got an autograph from the actress that played in the Blair Witch Project. And she noticed my Born Again tattoo. And she grabbed me as I was walking off. And she's like, hold on. She's like, let me understand this. She's like, you're a Christian, but you're a paranormal investigator. Like, yeah. She's like, how does that work for you? I'm like, it works great for me. I mean, but it's always good to be able to have those conversations. So yeah, my thing is I don't have a problem with any of those people until you make it a problem for me or the other people in the field, the legit people in the field. There's only one person I have a problem with, and I've already mentioned the name several times, and that's and the reason I have a problem with them is because they actually legitimately made it hard for me to investigate at 3 different locations. So at Octagon Hall in Franklin, Kentucky, at the Old South Pittsburgh Hospital, and the Harriman Hospital, both in Tennessee. When you go there to investigate now, you're no longer allowed to go live or record or release your video until it's approved by the people. And they specifically told me it's because of Sam and Kobe. Because Sam and Kobe ran around saying everything was a demon. And they're like, there ain't no demons here. They're like, we don't want that kind of publicity. So if you're doing that, that becomes an issue, and I will call you out on that. If you're faking stuff, I will call you out on that. Otherwise, do whatever you want to. I mean, you're the one that's got to sleep with it tonight, not me. Just don't make the field look like a joke, and don't fake stuff. That's all I ask. I don't think that's too much to ask. My goal when I leave the paranormal field, and I mean, I'm 51 now, and I don't plan on stopping as long as I can hold a flashlight and a voice recorder. I'm going to be investigating. So, but when I finally step away, my goal is to leave the field better than it was when I got into it. That's my goal. So all right. So we skipped over the icebreaker questions because honestly, I don't feel like they pertain too much to our conversation. But I'll tell you what the icebreaker questions are, and if you want to answer them, feel free to answer them. The first icebreaker question. We're already 27 minutes into the conversation, but the first icebreaker question is actually a two-part question, and it is: what is your favorite location you've been to, and what would be your bucket list location?
Well, one of my bucket list places is Tarrytown, New York. I have not, and it's my absolute favorite Halloween story. I watch every year, and it's not that far from me, but I've yet to be there. The Sally House, I think, is one that is a formidable place. It was formerly the Shanley, but I was just there about a month ago, so that was on my bucket list. So yeah, so those would be like my favorites.
So I'm actually knocking off one of my bucket list locations in December. I'm actually going to me, it's the most haunted location in Kentucky. It's not as well known as like Waverly Hills and stuff, but to me, it's the most haunted place, and that's the Ditto House, which is owned by Ernie and Denise Packman Paranormal. They actually live there. Well, it's always been my bucket list location, and I'm going there December 6th. My other bucket list location that I'll probably never get to go to is Alcatraz. I would love to go to Alcatraz.
I just came back.
I would love to go there, and if you're talking about like unrealistic bucket list locations, it would be the catacombs in France. Sleepy
One
Hollow.
of the other bucket list places that I went to recently too, along with Alcatraz, but is the Mystery House, the in San Francisco, the Winchester. Yeah, that was awesome to go to.
That would be a cool place. Yeah. So another one of my big bucket list locations I'm going to knock off my list next year is Pinehurst. I've always wanted to go to Pinehurst, and I'm finally going to Pinehurst. I'm finally going there next year, and I've been doing this for, I say 35 years, but when I say 35 years, because that's when I graduated from high school, that's when I moved away and actually got to be able to, actually investigate. So really, I've probably been doing it closer to 40 years. And so I've been to a lot of my bucket list locations. I don't talk about my favorite locations very much because most of my favorite locations are residential locations. And, where I get to help people. Those are my favorite ones. But of course, I don't talk about those because those ain't for publicity. Those are just about helping the family, So I don't talk about those much. But those are my favorite. Those are my favorite ones.
Yeah. What I was trying to think of another one that senior moment that I just been to that. I'm sorry. St. Albans Sanatorium.
That's a good one.
And I went there many years ago, gave a workshop, and I was invited back and that was kind of really great to be there. It's a great place to go to investigate.
My team's got a couple of big ones left this year. We don't usually do anything in September because September, especially this September, because this September was my daughter's 16th birthday party, and you have to give your daughter a big sweet 16 party. So I had that, and then this weekend, tomorrow, I suffer from Chiari malformation. So September is Chiari malformation awareness month, and we have a Chiari Walk Across America. It's like Relay for Life, but it's for Chiari, and I'm the organizer for Kentucky. So I have that tomorrow. And then the next weekend, we have the Paranormal Expo. So we don't do anything in September. And then the very first weekend of October, I'm going to be at Rock Island. And then
I'll be there.
I'll see you there then. And so I'll be at Rock Island. And then we're going to I just forgot a hospital in Tennessee that Ghost Adventures was just at. We're going there in October, and then in November we're going to a place that I kind of have mixed emotions about. It's a famous place, but I don't really know how active it is and how true the stories are, if that makes sense. But we're going to the Bill Witch. We're going to the Bill Witch Cave. We're going to do all 4 locations, so that should be interesting anyway. But I don't know how I feel about the Bill Witch. If it's just, I don't know. But it'll be interesting one to knock off my list of bucket list locations, and then next year in January we're going back to Waverly Hills. It will be my 13th time there, but we just did it. Part of my team just did it this year, but a lot of my team didn't do it, and a lot of my team is like the bucket list location. So I was like, okay, I was like, we can do it. I'm like, the thing about Waverly though is it's one of those places that's almost priced itself out of popularity. It costs $2,000 to go there, and you have to pay it all up front.
I won't be going there.
and you can only, and if you want to do a private investigation, you can only do it Thursdays or Sundays, because on Fridays and Saturdays they do their private events. So it's one of the, there's a few places like that, and then you have other places. I don't mind paying to investigate if I know the money's going to keep the location alive or to help it. Like I said, we just went to the Glen House twice this year. The one up there in Cape, it cost $250 or $350 is all it costs, but it's actually a donation, and it goes to, right now all the money is actually going to fix the roof, but it goes to the location. So I don't mind paying for that. But anybody that's charging $2,000, that's just a tourist attraction. That's all that is. But it's still a good place. So when I tell people, if you ever get the chance to go into Waverly, the first floor is pretty much all you really have to see, because the first floor has your body chute, it has the morgue, and it has the electric shock therapy room. So that's your most active places right there. So let's talk about this. This is my favorite question to ask people right now, and you're a good one to ask us about. Let's talk about haunted objects.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a hot bucket location, hot bucket button topic, a hot button topic. If I could talk, it'd be nice right now. So I had I had Joe on here, and I've had Wayne on here, and I had so I think it was Wayne that explained it to me. His belief is that he don't think God would actually possess an object.
Like a human spirit. He doesn't believe that God will allow a human spirit to possess.
Right.
But
But he believes that.
One. Yeah.
But he believes that there could be enough energy surrounding the object that it can be it can have activity. And then his question he asked me, and it's an interesting question. I don't really have an answer. It's just an interesting question. The question he asked me is, at what point does that energy become an entity of itself?
That's a good question.
So what's your take on haunted objects?
Well, again, I probably agree with Wade on almost everything, because we have similar outlooks, and I agree with him. And also he would also say that Annabelle, for instance, is not possessed by a demon. A demon has attached to it. There's a difference. Yeah, and so I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, my whole field into into attached objects and all of that is fairly recent, because you didn't hear much. Now all of a sudden everybody has a haunted thing, haunted doll, haunted. But I do know I had a case in that had to do with a rocking horse that had an attachment, and we ended up at the end of me doing the deliverance on the house. Johnny Zaffis came and took the rocking horse for his museum. So we got it out. She just wanted it out of the house. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
they can have attachments, but again, you're going to be very careful. Not everything. I mean, just because you get it in a antique store, but sometimes they do carry something. And I do believe that you can, if your intention is believing that this thing is object, sometimes you can manifest it by that collective belief in that collective energy on it, and then it becomes something. I don't know what. It wouldn't be demonic, because you can't manifest a demonic out of nothing. That's God
right.
creates that. So, but yeah, that's my outlook.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that's important. What you just said about demonic spirits. We discuss that a lot on the here because obviously thanks to the YouTubers, only thing you have to do is say demon, 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 and you automatically get more likes. But what people have to understand about the demonic, a true demonic entity or whatever, to actually be demonic, it was every human. It's something that it's something unhuman that you may be dealing with a malicious spirit, but more than likely you're not dealing with a demonic spirit. Matter of fact, that's actually I'm actually in the process of getting my first book published, and the title of my book is "Don't Buy Generic Batteries," and it's probably not a demon. The memoirs of a paranormal investigator. So, there are demonic cases out there. I mean, neither one of us would deny that. I mean, I didn't train in demonology just because I thought it'd be fun, because it really wasn't. So I'm not saying there's not demonic cases, but they're the minority. So I've seen a lot of possessed, not possessed. I agree. They're not possessed. A lot of objects with attachments, and it just makes sense. The theory is, spirits are energy, blah blah blah. So if that's what they are, we are pseudoscience. So we don't really know what they are, and we won't really know the truth until after we're in heaven or hell, wherever we are. So but so especially if you take like a doll. So let's take like Annabelle. So if you have Annabelle, and the little girl who originally owned Annabelle, whatever, she's sick or whatever. And so Annabelle is like her best friend. So all of her energy is going to that doll. So that just makes sense. I was talking with my guest last week, and they went to Florida, and they went to Florida, and they went to the house where Robert is, but neither one of them would go in. And I was like, I was like, well, what's interesting is at least Robert looks scary. You know what I'm saying? If I saw Robert, I would think, hey, that's a freaky looking doll. Annabelle is just the Raggedy Ann doll. So
Right.
but my strangest attachment story I have is a location that it runs as a bed and breakfast in East Prairie, Tennessee. East Prairie, Missouri. I'm sorry, East Prairie, Missouri. A friend of mine owns it, Kristen, and her husband. This place is active, but they don't really know why. Like, we've investigated it like 3 times. Friends of mine have investigated. Last year, I had Aaron G. Thompson investigate it. It's got activity. With the team that I was talking about earlier, that I no longer associate or consider a biblical team, they were the first team to investigate this, and they try to take over from the owners. They try to take over the website and everything. Well, while they were investigating it, they decided to go from Southeast Missouri to New York State and get a haunted doll and bring it back to a location that's already active. I'm like, that has to be the dumbest thing and the most irresponsible thing I have ever seen in my life. And but I think we're all in agreement. They're not possessed; they're just attached. And supposedly Robert is the influence for Chucky, but that's not realistic at all. Robert's not going to be chasing you around with a knife, cutting your Achilles or any of that stuff. And the Annabelle in the movies is not the real Annabelle.
Oh, no. That was because Mattel wouldn't give permission for it to be used.
Yeah, and plus, it's a movie, so you need a doll that looks kind of freaky, and Raggedy Ann doesn't really look freaky, and so what people have to realize, it's not just dolls. There's other things that can be attached. Like my strange habit, if that's what you want to my strange hobby, if that's what you want to call it, is I collect bricks from locations. So I actually have a brick, and I have permission to get them. I'm not stealing them. I'm very respectful. I want to put that out there. I don't want people to be like, "Oh, kid's stealing a brick." No. So like the first one I ever got was I was investigating the old stone jail in Franklin, Kentucky. And what was interesting is they were actually doing a silent auction on the brick to raise money to keep the place in operation. I actually got the brick for $25. I figured it would go for a lot more than that, but so I have that brick. That's the first one I ever got. Then I got the next one I got is the one that probably means the most to me because it's a local one. So for the people out there that don't know, Mayfield, Kentucky, which is where I live now, it was destroyed by a tornado 4 years ago. I mean, totally destroyed. So when it came through, it damaged the oldest building, the oldest known haunted location in Mayfield. It was called the Hall Hotel. Well, they tried to save it for a while, and then they eventually decided they couldn't save it, so they tore it down. And I actually got a brick for that. And that brick's interesting to me because my abilities tell me that there's something attached to it. Like what I feel is when the building got torn down, the spirit that was there lost its home. So it's just kind of, So and then I recently got a brick from Waverly Hills too. It's actually a half brick. So anything can be attached. So I had a residential case, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because it was a residential case, but it was my wife's cousin's husband. So, her cousin-in-law or whatever. It was his dad's house. And his dad died of cancer, and he died. He refused to go to hospice. He died in his house because he built it, whatever. And when he died, they sold it to these Mexican people. When the Mexican people kept telling them that they were having his dad's furniture was all still there, and they kept saying that his dad's chair would rock on its own, and they would smell cigarette smoke because he would smoke. So for coming from the chair, so So that's an attachment because he loved that house. He loved that chair. So yeah. So good stuff. So let's talk about, you mentioned it earlier. So let's talk about another hot topic in the field right now. And let's talk about like Ouija boards.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I'll
I'm
say
not a
Ouija boards is another form of conjuring that can be very dangerous. And the reason being, and yeah, I get flack from this by practitioners, but I'm sorry. The reality is, no human being, I don't care what gifts you have, uh, uh, any any match for a demonic spirit. It's a fallen angel with power, with intellect, with everything far surpassing any human being, no matter what gift.
right.
So, what happens when you play with Ouija boards, you don't know what you're opening yourself to. And again, it could come through as Uncle Arthur or Little Billy, and it's actually not, and a typical case like that about being wrong was Annabelle. When they got the doll, a psychic said it was the spirit of a girl named Annabelle. No, it wasn't. You know, so they were able to outwit, even someone with psychic gifts. So um, it's a danger. You leave yourself open, and once the doors are open, it's hard to close them
Right. Well, I
because you
tell
got to
people,
find them.
I tell people all the time, and you touched on it, so I'm going to go ahead and say it because it's important. I tell people all the time, they're like, "Oh, I'm talking to a kid spirit." I'm like, "You're probably not talking to a kid spirit. Demons will use kid spirits to get your trust because we're a lot more likely, especially females, are a lot more likely to trust a kid than they are to trust Hosafor or whatever, so or Legion or whatever, So yeah, and I'm not saying that there's not any kid spirits out there. I think there are. My theory with kid spirits, if they're true kid spirits, is that the reason that they haven't crossed over yet is they don't understand the process because as adults, whether we are Christian or whatever, we've still at least been exposed to the crossing over. We've seen it in movies or whatever. So as adults, we pretty well understand it. We don't really talk to kids about it because we don't expect them to die before us. We don't expect our. So that's my theory. It could be wrong, but it makes sense to me. So, but yeah, so I'm not a Ouija board person either. I'm not. I don't know if I'm anti Ouija board, but I don't. Like you said, even as a trained demonologist, I don't want to come across a demon. That's not something I want to do. That's not on my to-do list. So, and so yeah, so yeah. But my first ever exposure to a Ouija board is kind of a funny story. It's kind of as funny as being exposed to a Ouija board can be. But I was 13. So this was 1987, and I was a good church kid. I was involved in my youth group. I went to youth group a lot, honestly, to get away from my home because it was an abusive home. Uh, but I used to be a good looking guy. I don't know what happened to me, but I used to have wavy blonde hair. I mean, I was a good looking guy. So my youth pastor's adopted daughter was having her sweet 16 birthday party. Well, she had just got back home from being sent away to, like one of the boot camps, the straight out kids or whatever. Nowadays, we would call her like goth or emu, but in 1987, we didn't have those terms. They were just kind of odd. But she was hot. I mean, she was really hot. She honestly looked like Alyssa Milano. So she was hot. And she was having her sweet 16, she was having her 16th birthday party. And and I was the only boy that got invited. So 13-year-old me wasn't going to say no to a 16-year-old birthday party. So I went, and that's what they did. They broke out the Ouija board, and I did attempt it, and most people would assume like with my gifts it would be like a natural thing, but I didn't really get anything out of it. The interesting thing that happened though is they played another game. It was a game. It was another way to open up things. And it did scare me. I had a traumatic experience with that. It was called 13 Doors and 13 Staircases. And so you laid like head to head with that body, and then feet to feet, and you made like a pattern of a house, and then you did staircases. And you suppose, I don't even know why I was dumb enough to do this at 13. I mean, I wasn't very smart at 13. I was thinking about other things, but yeah, the object of the thing was to allow the spirits or whatever to open up the doorway. And the doorway that was opened up for me was a very traumatic doorway. It was actually the first traumatic thing I ever experienced with my gifts. And it actually changed the way I saw paranormal investigating. It changed it. I mean, yeah, that was, at that point, I actually believed that there was that's when there was no doubt in my mind that there was demonic. Before then I was like, So don't mess with things that you don't know what you're doing with. You're gonna make things worse. I did a residential case, and we were able to help the spirit, the family, and everybody. So it ended up being a good case. But when we got there, that's what had increased the activity. The house already had activity where they got a foster daughter in there, and she was like 15, and the foster daughter decided it would be a good idea to play with the Ouija board. So don't play with stuff if you don't know what you're doing. And even if you do know what you're doing, leave it alone. You do not want to deal with a demonic entity unless you have to. That's what I tell my people. I'm not running away from a demonic entity, but I'm not running into it either. I'm trained so I can help the family if I come across that. But that doesn't mean I want to face it. That just means I feel that with my gifts and my ability that God gave me, I should be able to help anybody that needs help. So I'm trained in case I come across it. In my 35, 40 years of investigating, I've only came across one investigation that I would even say may be demonic. I've dealt with malicious spirits. I've been bit, I've been scratched, I've had things thrown at me, but actually demonic. It was a residential case that I can talk about because the family gave me permission, and it was also over 25 years ago. So I think it's safe to talk about it now. I actually talk about it in my book, but it happened in Indiana. When I lived in Indiana, I was actually a pro MMA fighter. So I lived outside Louisville. I lived just across the bridge. They called it the sunny side of Louisville, but it was in Indiana. And so we got a call from the in-laws to come investigate this. They wanted closures, what they wanted. And the story that was backed up by police reports and everything was it was a murder-suicide. The husband, this case still gets to me. The husband lost his job at John Deere and had fallen into depression. Well, he got to the point that he was addicted to alcohol and drugs, and he decided to look into occult practices. Well, he ended up killing his kids, his wife, and then himself. So the in-laws wanted us to try to give him some closure. So So we get up there, and what's interesting about this place, and I laugh at this part because it's just kind of funny. Getting to the location was like something from a Stephen King movie. We had to go underneath the famous Crying Baby Bridge, up there, the one where supposedly the mother throws her kid off the bridge and she haunts it, blah, blah, blah. We had to go underneath that. And then when we get to the house, it's down a private road, and caddy cornered from the house is an abandoned 1816 cemetery. And so we get there, and I guess the neighbors had decided to try to take matters in their own hand, and they had bulldozed the house down. And so we had to climb into the attic window to get into the house. And when we entered it, it was on the first floor. Well, the police tape was still all there. The blood stains were still there. So the first thing we got to was the kids' room, and matching the police reports, it appeared that he had killed the kids while they were asleep.
Wow.
So then we got to the master bedroom, and he made his wife get down on her knees, and he shot her executioner style.
Oh boy.
And then he shot himself. Oddly, he didn't shoot himself this way. He shot himself this way. So, like I said, it was a gruesome scene. It's still one of the most emotional scenes. I mean, you can tell it still bothers me. But while we were there, we found something told me to, I know it was my guess, but something told me to look behind the dresser. So I moved the dresser, and there was a spot cut out, in the paneling. And when I moved it, there was his journal. And in his journal, he had documented like his occult practices, like, trying to summon. And then I was able to turn that over to the police. And then I was drawn to the walk-in closet. It was one of the big walk-in closets. And when I get in the walk-in closet, in the very back of the closet, on his wife's side, was a piece of carpet that was cut with like an X-Acto knife. And when I peeled it back, the padding was also cut. So I peeled both of those back, and there was a pentagon in the closet. So I turned all that over to the cops. But so maybe that was demonic. Maybe I still don't consider it demonic. I consider it evil, malicious. But when I did come away with that, I was able to make contact with the wife and the kids, and they did cross over. So I was able to give the in-laws, her parents, I was able to give them the closure they wanted. So that was good. And then I was able to help the cops too. So I guess it was a win-win situation. So yeah. So let's talk about, I'm going to let you go before too long, but I do like, I'm enjoying talking to you, so I hate to let you go. But I do like to do what I call my lightning rounds. I do 2 lightning rounds. One is we discuss like different kinds of hauntings. If you notice, I tend not to use the word haunted. I usually use active. And I do that because if you say haunted, most people just assume it's evil or whatever. So I tend to say active instead of haunted. But so we talk about different kinds of activity, and you just give me your opinion if you've experienced that and what you think about it. I mean, so that's what we'll start out with. So let's start out with a residual haunting. What's your take on a residual haunting? Have you ever dealt with one? I mean, just give us your take on residual.
To my knowledge, I don't remember at all encountering residual haunting, though I believe in it, and it's unintelligent. It's not an intelligent haunt, and basically it's just a film with the energy. And I think a lot of times, if you go to Scotland or England or Ireland to the castles, there's famous, scenes of ghosts coming, and it's always every night at the same time. And they don't know that you're there. It's not intelligent. So, but to my knowledge, I haven't experienced residual yet.
So, so you explain residual perfectly. So I tell people, like, when I do I do a lot of paranormal 101 workshops, and I tell them a residual hunting is like a glitch in the matrix, or like a videotape that keeps looping itself. So, for some reason, traditionally, residuals always been considered the most common hunting. I debate that, but first,
Yeah.
I'll tell you my residual hunting story. So we have this location in Paducah, Kentucky, which of course is my hometown. Uh, it's called the Metropolitan Hotel, where it was the African American hotel during segregation. Um, all the big celebrities went there, all the athletes, all the singers. Uh, Josh Gibson, the Black Babe Ruth stayed there. Everybody stayed there. So it's an interesting location because of that. But the backstory is even more interesting because it was actually owned by a black lady, and in those days that was very uncommon. So a black lady. She had been trying to own it forever. She actually tried to talk her husband into buying it when he was alive. Well, he wouldn't. But it was their house, but he tried to talk her into. He tried to talk him into opening it as a hotel, and he wouldn't do it. So when he died, she used his name and opened it up. And there's lots of spirits there, but the most known one is a residual one of her. And what's supposed to happen is at 11:01. I don't know why 11:01, but 11:01 p.m. she comes down the staircase. That's all she does, just comes down the staircase. Well, I've investigated the Metropolitan Hotel 13 times. No exaggeration, 13 times. And every investigation I've ever done, at 10:55, I shut down the investigation, and we all sit up down at the bottom of the staircase to see if we can catch Miss Maggie coming down the staircase. I had never been able to catch her until my 11th investigation. My 11th investigation there, I actually did it with a film crew from Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. And that, for whatever reason, that night, we actually captured on video what looks like a residual coming down the staircase, and the curtains even moved. So that's my only residual haunting story. So, but like I was saying earlier, for whatever reason, residual people say is the most common, but I debate that. I think your most common is the one that we'll get ready to talk about, and that's an intelligent haunting. I think the intelligent hauntings are your most common because you actually know they're there. A residual could be anything really. So let's talk about an intelligent haunting.
Yeah, intelligent haunt is the opposite. It is a spirit of someone who has lived, and is still a soul, and they know you're there, and at times when you try to interact, it will interact with you. You can ask questions to find out why they're there, what's happening. So I think those are the more common than residuals, unless you're, like I say, unless you're in Europe, in these old places. But here, I would say that the intelligent haunts are far more common.
All right. So our next one that we're going to talk about is this one's kind of interesting because I don't know. So we'll talk about it, then we'll talk about it. So let's talk about poltergeist activity.
Yeah, I think I have one or two cases of poltergeist activity, and that is a varying beliefs on how to define that, but usually it's energy that comes from like some kind of a trauma or like puberty. If you have girls going through puberty, it's not something that its manifestations and stuff, but it's not going to be there forever. So, in cases like that, I just tell people, it will go away eventually. That it's not going to harm you because it's not technically a spirit. Now, others say it's a noisy ghost. So, it depends on what school you're in.
Yeah. I think that's the problem with it. Like you said, in order to actually discuss poltergeist, we need to finally define what a poltergeist is. So by definition, it's a noisy ghost. But like you said, the most logical thought process nowadays is it's a manifest of energy from the people. I think that's a good definition. Otherwise, if it's just a ghost, if it's just a spirit throwing stuff, why is it? What's different than that? That's just an intelligent haunting, just more violent, but it's still just an intelligent haunting. So I think if you're going to put it as a different category, that definition that we agree on, I think is your most logical definition. So then our next kind of activity that we're going to talk about is a malicious spirit. And notice I said malicious and not demonic, because those are two different things. I always tell people all the time, excuse my language here, but if you were a dickhead when you were alive, you're going to be a dickhead when you're dead. And that's how we get a malicious spirit. So let's talk about malicious spirits.
Yeah, there are some that are violent, that are mean, and for whatever reason, they bring that into their realm even after death. They're also what I call damned human spirits. And these are souls that actually went to hell, but they are in league with the demonic to work with them. And you get rid of them the same way that you would get rid of demons. Malicious spirits, again, I use the name of Jesus to command them to be quiet and not to harm anyone. But yeah, there is a difference. One is just for some reason mean-spirited, maybe doesn't understand why you're in their house or why this is happening, and they're frustrated, but they're human.
All right. So the next one is we're going to talk about demonic spirits. So, yeah. So I think it's important, like you just said, with the malicious spirit. You said you use Jesus' name to. So I think that's important that people understand that, because it's not like we see in a lot of the TV shows or whatever. It's not the demon. It's not the demonologist or the priest. We're not the ones that get rid of the demon. That's Jesus. He's the only one that can. We can't do that. We're not that powerful. So I think that's important. So with that intro there, let's talk about a demonic spirit, a true demonic spirit.
A true demonic spirit is something that was never human. It was created angelic. It's a fallen angel. It has all the attributes of an angel, with superiority, with strength, with intellect, and with things like that. They're very patient. And when they watch us and wait for their time. So those are the ones that you have to be careful. And again, as I said, if you run into one you suspect you need to stop. A seasoned person can use religious provocation in order to see if it's true that they are. But always in the name of Jesus Christ. When I address something I think is demonic, I say, by my authority as a priest and in the name of Jesus, I command you. Because if you're saying it, I command you, they're going to look at you and say, "Who are you? You're a human being. You're going to get clobbered."
Right,
and I've seen that.
right.
I've seen that in action in my years. And one of the person that was doing that, calling all kinds of names, nobody ever sees him anymore. So they'll retaliate. So you got to be careful.
It's a dangerous situation. I think it's important for people to realize that a demon wasn't ever human. And in order for it to possess, it has to have some kind of invitation.
Correct.
People, it's not like you see on TV in the movies, they can't just be like, hey, I'm going to possess that guy. There has to be some. Now, I do believe there could be unintentional invitations. I think like drugs and alcohol abuse, depression, mental illness, those things can be like a gateway without actually saying, I think that, but I think it's important for people to realize that to be possessed, they have to be invited. I think it's important for people to understand that if we're talking about like a spirit, a ghost, I prefer the term spirit, but if we're talking about a spirit, a spirit can actually cross over whenever they want to. If they're still here, they choose to be here. Now that just like. I think they can subconsciously choose to be here sometimes. And I think sometimes there's ones that may not even understand that they're dead, but they still have to make the decision to be here.
They're free will.
When we cross over a spirit, we're not crossing over spirit. We can help them. We can show them the light. We can show them the way, but they have to make that decision. That's a misunderstanding you see especially on TV, you're always seeing like, oh, I crossed them over. No, we don't cross them over. They have to cross over themselves. And and I've seen it. People like to trick me. Also, a more powerful spirit can keep a weaker spirit. Yes, but it's still a decision to stay. They can try to. One case. One of the cases where I actually get to talk religion in my investigations is we got called to a road by the Graves County, by the sheriff's department down here, where we have to be really good friends with the chief deputy sheriff, and so he called us to this road because this is one of those urban legends you hear in every town, but here it was actually a true story. It's the urban legend about how the boyfriend and girlfriend were going to prom, but they got in the car wreck and died, blah. But it's a true story here, apparently. And so when we got there, it was interesting because we made contact with the female first. She was the first one to make contact with us, and she was a talkative one. And basically, what she told us was that she had crossed over because she wanted to cross over with her boyfriend. But she hadn't seen him since the wreck, which had been like 24 years. But so it took us a while. It took us like 93 minutes to finally get in contact with the boyfriend. And when we got into contact with him, we told him that his girlfriend was waiting to cross over with her, together. And he told us under no. He wasn't crossing over. He appreciated her waiting for him, but he was going to hell, and he didn't want to cross over. I mean, that's specifically what he told us. So that was kind of an interesting case, especially since we have the credibility of the sheriff's department with us, So it was kind of an interesting case. Let's talk a little bit about the Conjuring House and stuff. So I'm actually going to see The Last Rites as soon as I get done with my podcast tonight. I'm actually headed to the theater. I'm going to the 9:00 show. So I'm a big horror movie fan anyway, which some people are like, why are you a fan of horror movies and you're a paranormal investigator? And that playing with stuff. I was like, you're crazy. But I found out like Monday or Tuesday that in the credits that they have a tribute to Dan Riviera. So yes, that made me want to see it even more because I consider Dan a friend. I never had the privilege to meet Dan. We were actually going to meet for the first time at Rock Island. So when I meet you for the first time is when I was supposed to meet Dan for the first time. I did talk to Dan on the phone like every week. Like last time I talked to him, I was actually walking through the grocery store, and we were on the phone for an hour and a half while I was grocery shopping, and we talked about everything not just paranormal investigating. Anybody that knows Dan had three loves: his family, paranormal investigating, and classic cars. So that's what we were talking about while I was shopping in Ruler's grocery store. We were talking about classic cars because he was actually thinking about coming down here to be part of my event next year. And I had a friend that was selling a Mach 1, a Mustang Mach 1. So I was going to put them in touch with each other. So that's what we were talking about. So Dan's passing hit me hard. Matter of fact, for the fans of the show, you guys probably already know this, but he was actually my first guest this season. So season 2, episode 1 was Dan Riviera. So Dan's passing actually hit me hard. So
Dan was a good friend of mine, and he's someone who always looked out for me. And yeah, I took it hard, especially since I was with him on the tour, and I couldn't go to Gettysburg because I was in Portugal. But if I did, Dan was my roommate when we were on the tour, so more than likely, I'm sure we would have been roommates. And I can't even think, about finding him. But it was sad.
It was,
but
and it showed the ugly part of the paranormal field because instead of just letting a good man have his time and then his family, mourn and pray for his family, you had that dark part of the culture be like, oh, Annabelle killed him, or
right.
that was uncalled for. Dan was one of those men that he would help anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he needs to be remembered. But so to Dan's family, you guys are still in my prayers. Dan's always going to be part of me. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the Conjuring House and all that stuff. So
I've never been to the Conjuring House. I live in Rhode Island, but I've never been there. What I will tell you is there's some fact and some fiction. And there's a lot of. I think the first one had more factual than any of the other Conjuring movies, but there were some fallacies, and no one hung themselves there. Bathsheba did not hang herself. She was not a witch. She was an upstanding Christian woman in the community there, and buried on consecrated ground. So that was a urban legend somehow. But I will say this. Again, so many people investigated, so many people did stuff there that it probably manifested something. I had to do a deliverance, an exorcism over a home of a house right next to the Conjuring House that abuts that was originally on the part of the property. And it wasn't pretty, but I'd say some of that we don't know, but it is a formidable place. How much of it originally was, or how much of it was manifested afterwards, I don't know.
Well, the thing is I read the actual files, the actual warrant, that's what I tell people to do. Whenever you get a movie, especially if it's based on a true story, they put that on there to sell tickets. You need to actually. But what kills me, and I talked with this, me and Dan talked about it, me and Wayne talked about it. What kills me is the people, especially the younger generation, as I like to call them, the YouTube generation. They want to try to talk bad about the Warrens to try to destroy their legacy,
and they never knew them.
They never knew them. I didn't know them. I knew them. I connected with them in the book. I actually have letters from them. They actually wrote me letters because I would write them, correspond with them. Yes, people, that was back when we actually wrote letters with pens and papers, and we had to put them in an envelope and we had to mail them. Yeah, it actually worked that way. And so I actually have it. You can't see it behind me, but I actually have it on my wall. The last letter I got from him, I got it framed. That's how much it meant to me. And I have a friend that I consider a friend in the field. I consider him a good friend, and he 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 tries to trash everything about all of it, and I'm like, honestly, if it was for the Warrens, none of us would be here now. There wouldn't be a paranormal fair. So whether you agree with them or not, they deserve your respect. I was talking to when me and Dan was talking about it. He was like, he's like, he's like, if you actually ever knew them, they would just good people. Joe said the same thing. He's like, they were like family. He's like, people talk about them, but they didn't actually know them. He's like, Joe was like, I knew them as people, and that's what it's about. I don't know what's wrong with this generation where they think by tearing down people, it builds them up. But it doesn't. It doesn't. It destroys
and I don't even like to give that any energy by talking about it, to be honest with you.
Me
I
either.
don't want it because I don't want to give it energy by even addressing it because I don't read the stuff. I take Nesper's philosophy and we don't look at it and we move forward. And I don't care what other people think, and I don't even enter into that conversation.
I don't care either, and I mean
because it's a wasted breath to talk about it and to give any of that time on the air.
Yeah, you're right. I agree, and I mean and I agree so much. That's one of the main reasons Joe is going to be he's going to be part of my expo next year because that's part of the legacy, and I just think it deserves. I think the legacy deserves to be carried on. So, all right, so here's our last speed round, and then we'll get out of here. We're going to talk about different kinds of locations you can investigate. You give me your opinion on whether you would investigate it, if you have investigated it, kind of like that. For example, we'll start out with like a cemetery. In my opinion, I'm not a big investigating a cemetery person. I'm not going to tell somebody else not to, but for me, this is the way I look at a cemetery. The person didn't live there. They didn't die there. They had no connection there. So why would they be there? So, and then if there happens to be somebody there, that's their peaceful spot. So we're disrupting them. So I'm not a cemetery person. So.
I'm not a big investigator because I do the work. I help people. I go some places, with friends and stuff, but that's not the paramount of my work is going to haunted locations. It's actually helping people who have, locally that have those problems.
I'm the same way. When I tell people, I mean, we do a lot of the locations, but I tell people that's really us training. That's me training my team. So when we go to a residential, we're equipped to be able to help them. So we'll just go through these real quickly then, because like you said, you don't really. So the next one I like to talk about is a hospital. So to me, a hospital is an interesting place because I think a hospital can kind of be more of a gateway than an actual location. But a hospital is seeing birth and it's seeing death. So I think a lot of times that might be where spirit first comes, and then they go back to their home or something. Mm-hmm. So that's my opinion of that. So, and then we get like, then for hospitals, we can talk about like an asylum. Asylums are obviously active locations. I don't think I know we see on TV that everything in an asylum is usually evil, but I think most of your stuff in the asylums are just there. People like, I got grabbed. I'm like, well, what you have to remember is 25% of the people that was in an asylum were mute and deaf. So the only way they had to get your attention is to grab your clothes. They're not trying to be malicious. They're just trying to get your attention.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my opinion anyway. So here's my last question for you, and then we'll just get over it. So we both, we're on the same page. We both do this so we can help people. So would you go into an investigation, a case, whatever term you want to use, when you go on location to help a family, do you protect yourself, or do you just
absolutely.
go in?
Absolutely.
Me too.
Before I go in and after we're done.
Me too.
Yep.
You have
to. You have
before
to.
I go.
If not, you leave yourself open.
Yeah, you make yourself a target. And I've actually, and I'm sure you have too, I've actually dealt with entities that, even with me protecting myself, I still got physically sick afterwards. I mean, and so I would never, especially with my abilities, because I like to make myself open where they can communicate to me. So with me being an open channel, if I don't protect myself, I'm making myself a target, and I don't want to be a target. So, and I think it's important. I'm just going to touch what I consider a couple of highlights here in our conversation, and you can add what you want and agree with me, disagree with me, or whatever. But I think some of the most important things that we said was, first of all, people have to realize that spirits are still here. They choose to be here. We don't cross them over. They cross over themselves. We can help guide them, but it's their choice. And then I think it's important that people understand that demonic spirits were never human. And they're more powerful than ours. And they have to be invited in to possess us. And only in Jesus' name can they be getting rid of. It's not ours. Mm-hmm. So to me, those are like the most important things we covered. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yep. I agree.
All right. So in closing, just tell everybody how to get a hold of you, what you got going on, that kind of stuff. And thank you for being on the show.
Yeah. If they want to get in touch, they can go on to the website of my apostolate. I have the Holy Sword Apostolate. I'm the founder and co-director, along with Father Ken Torres, who's in California. We're the east and the west of that. And he's also coordinator of our clergy network. So we try to help people holistically with those things. So they can go on to the website, which is www.holyswordapostolate.com.
All right. Well, again, thank you for being on the show, and I look forward to our friendship growing in the coming years. And we'll see everybody next week. Just for a reminder for everybody locally, next week we will have a show, but it's also the night before my expo, so it may actually be a short show, but we will have a show because the show must go on, I guess. All right, we will see everybody next week. Father Bob, thanks again for being on here.
Oh, you're welcome.